Hi everyone, how are you? We're going to be talking about unemployment, another indicator that is very, very important for policymakers to understand what's going on in the economy, to be able to make adjustments so people can live better. So we have three macroeconomic goals: steady growth, low unemployment, and low inflation. Well, obviously, this topic is related to low unemployment. We're going to talk about zero unemployment in a little bit. But of course, we want to have people in a job, people working. We're very, very concerned when unemployment is rising or is high. So we care about indicators. Think of all the things that are going to be affected by, the news of unemployment being high or going up in a country, right? How is it that businesses, stock market, people start to react about that? So we're going to be very specific about who's employed and who's not employed. So who's unemployed. So whenever we look at people who are unemployed, yes, we're talking about people who are not working, but we're talking also about people that they're not working, but they're looking for a job and they're willing to start right away. That is going to be very, very important. And I wanted to start by sharing this with you. So look at the evolution of jobs in the United States. I'm fascinated by this graph because it shows how much it has changed. So a little bit over 200 years ago, the big majority of jobs were in agriculture. Today, by far, the big majority of jobs are in services. So if you're looking for the official number for unemployment, I invite you to go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, and look up what is the latest unemployment figure in the United States. That is the website where I go to whenever I'm working and I need official data. And unemployment has been going up and down, and that is, so that's the nature of the beast. That's what it is. But I can tell you that in other countries, this is a little bit worse. Also, I want to bring to your attention that who's in the labor force has changed. So today we have a lot more women in the labor force than we did, less than 100 years ago. When you look at this graph, think of what were the things that were happening that alter employment. In one of my previous videos, I talk about the Great Depression. Think of the world wars. Think of, the major events in the world and in the United States that affected the cause of, of employment. The Great Depression was a major issue in the United States. It was the biggest crisis that we ever lived in this soil. And unemployment was very, very high. It was almost 25%. That is a lot. And it was a terrible time to be unemployed because there was no safety net. So someone who was unemployed didn't have help from the government. So it had to be terrible for people to go through this. So unemployment has, varied depending on what was going on in the world and in our country. Now, how do we measure unemployment? This is going to be very, very important. So we have the household survey, and that's a survey of around 60,000 households, and the payroll survey, which covers 400,000 companies and government agencies. So we need these two in order to have a sense of who's unemployed, what's going on. And policymakers are looking at this like a hawk. They're paying a lot of attention to this figure. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is going to be showing and following the following information. The size of the labor force. They're going to be looking at the number of people who are employed, those of us who have a job, the number of people who are unemployed, those who do not have a job, but are looking and willing and able to start right away. Now, the Census Bureau contacts around 60,000 households every single month as part of the population survey. And in a minute, I'm going to be showing you what are the questions that people get asked. So the formula for unemployment is pretty straightforward. So we have the number of people who are unemployed over the labor force. So not everyone in the country, people who are in the labor force. Okay, so this is a survey. Imagine that you get this phone call, right? So the first thing that you're going to get asked is the 3 questions that we have in part A. You're going to say, hello, we have a few questions to ask you. So, are you under the age of 16? Are you in an institution? And by institution, I don't mean church or school. By institution, I mean, so are you in jail, in an institution that prevents you from working in the civil area? Or are you on active military duty? Again, so these are questions for civilians. It's not that we don't think that people who are on active duty in the military are not working. Of course, they're working, but they are not part of this equation, right? So we're looking at civilians right now. So if you say yes to any of these questions, because you are under the age of 16, because you are in an institution, or you are on active duty in the military, they would say, thank you very much. That's the end of the conversation. You will not be surveyed. Now, if you answer no to all of those questions, they are going to move on to the next set of questions. They're going to ask you, have you worked at all last week for pay or for profit? Or have you worked 15 hours or more in a family business? If you say yes to either of those 2 questions, check, you are employed. If you say no to both questions, they're going to ask you, have you been actively searching for a job? Are you available to start a job right away? So if you do not have a job, you are looking for a job and you can start right away, you are unemployed. If you are employed and unemployed, those 2 groups are part of the labor force. Now, if you're not working, but you're also not looking for a job, or you cannot start working right away because of a million different things that could have happened to you, right? So any of those situations, you're not in the labor force. Now, I want you to be very critical at these questions, so I love indicators because they make my job so much easier, but you always have to be critical of them and you have to know what they measure and what they do not measure. Think about how you feel about this idea of, have you worked at all last week for pay or for profit? So have you worked an hour? Have you earned $1? If the answer is yes, you are employed. And then we're going to talk, okay, so you could be employed, but that might not be enough for your household, right? You're not making enough money. Well, it doesn't matter. So you still count as employed for, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And again, be very careful with this idea. So being unemployed means that you don't have a job, but you're looking for one and you can start working right away. If you do not have a job and you're not looking or you cannot start right away, so you're not in the labor force. I'm going to be giving you some examples in a minute. So I have the exact same information with numbers, and these are very, very rough numbers. So the working age population in the United States is around 250 million people. We have about 157 million in the labor force. Some of them are employed, about almost 150 million, and some are unemployed. We also have a bunch of people who are not in the labor force because they are not available for work. They cannot work. Or they are not willing to work. My grandfather has been retired for many years, so he's not willing. He's dealing with health issues. He cannot go back to the workforce. So he's not unemployed. My grandpa is not unemployed. He's just not in the labor force, right? So we consider to be employed someone who works full-time or part-time, someone who has a temporary job, someone who has a job but is on vacation or is ill or is on maternity leave or is on strike, or someone who's working in a family business at least 15 hours. Now, something very important that I should have said. So when they ask you about this information, it's about last week. So have you worked at all last week for pay or for profit? So yes, last week I did work for pay or for profit. this week I don't have a job. It's not about this week, right? They're asking you always about last week. So who is unemployed? So anyone who is not working, they have not a job, but they are actively looking for a job. And in the labor force, we have the people who are employed and unemployed. So full-time students are tricky because they could be anything, right? So you could be a full-time student who is working part-time, you're employed. You're a full-time student who's working full-time, you're employed. You are a full-time student who's looking for a job, willing and able to start right away, you're unemployed. You are a full-time student and you're not looking for a job because all you want to do is do very well at school. You're not in the labor force. So if you're a student and you're working, even if it is part-time, you are employed. Now, we also have the situation of people that have been looking for a job, but they think that they're not gonna get anything and they stop looking. So we call those discouraged workers. So if you're not working, but you're not looking for a job, you're not unemployed, you're just not in the labor force. And I always think, so sometimes my students are very lucky and they get to take a gap year after college and travel Europe. Well, they're not unemployed. They're not looking for a job during that time. So just stop for a second and think if you see any problems with the way in which we account for unemployment. Do you like this? Do you think that this is precise? So some of the things that my students usually mention is, okay, so I might be employed, I might have been employed last week, not this week. I might be employed, but that doesn't mean that I get to cover all my bills. Yes, you could be underemployed. You could be a discouraged worker, someone who has looked in the past, but not in the last 4 weeks because they are like, oh my God, there's nothing for me. And then something very technically, marginally attached workers that have been looking in the last year, but not in the last 4 weeks. So when you're a policymaker, this is challenging because we're always looking in, in the mirror and looking behind. It's like, oh my God. So companies are lagging behind what's going on in the market, and they might wait for things to pick up before they can jump and they can start hiring again. So think of what happened in 2008 or during the pandemic. So we have discouraged workers. So people would love to have a different job, but would love to have a job, but they gave up looking, right? So those people, if someone is not looking for a job, we cannot count them as unemployed. Underemployed workers. So there are a lot of part-time workers who want to have a full-time job. You could be someone who's severely overqualified for a job, but this is what you have, and that's what you're sticking to it. So think of some reasons why people might be unemployed, some reasons that have to do with what's going on in the world, in the country, in your state, in your city, in your industry, right? Some skills have become obsolete. So my mom, when she was, before she went to college, she became a typist. And, she got this amazing job. And she was making a lot of money for the time for her family being a typist. What happened if my mom would have not gone to law school? Would she have a job today? Probably not, because no one is looking for that skill. So, things change all the time. Things are of the age of AI, and what is it that the labor force is expecting from us? well, you guys probably are not going to remember this image, but I remember buying CDs, and I used to love that, right? So music stores don't exist anymore. Places where we rent DVDs or VHS. So things change all the time, and we have to adapt to the new technology. So think of all the reasons why unemployment might happen. So there could be, things related to different business cycles. The issue of minimum wages is something that we get to discuss a lot in my classes, because on one side, we all want people to have a living wage. On the other side, I know that every time that minimum wage goes up, a lot of the stores around my home have more and more machines doing checkouts, right? So businesses are going to fight this idea of minimum wage, because they're going to say, okay, so if I have to pay more to an employee, I have to make my products more expensive, then consumers are not going to be buying them. So think of what can alter the trends of employment in a country. We have economic conditions, we have demographic changes, we have socioeconomic reasons, we have population changes. So think of historical examples for all of this. Now we have different types of unemployment. Frictional unemployment. So these are workers who voluntarily quit their job because they're looking for something else. We have structural unemployment. So it's like being a typist, right? So no one is going to hire you because you know how to type well. I still type with 2 fingers, and I got a PhD, right? So no one cares about how I type. So structural unemployment is changed by, it's caused by changes in technology and demand of different skills. And cyclical unemployment, think of the up and downs of the economy. So I can tell you about my industry, which is academia. If I quit my job today, well, it's going to be really tough for me, because when schools hire, they hire, and we have contracts that start in September. It would be extremely rare that I get a job halfway through the semester. Literally, someone needs to die somewhere for a position to open up. God forbid, I would never want that, right? So if I wanna quit today, well, chances are that halfway through the semester, schools are not gonna be hiring. I'm gonna have to do something else until September of next year, when schools hire again. Structural unemployment. So what happened if, as an instructor, I never wanted to learn how to use email or internet, or maybe artificial intelligence right now, right? So can I still have a job, or is like my skills are going to not be useful? So, or sometimes I think about the statistical programs that I learned when I was in graduate school. They don't exist anymore. So I had to push myself and learn on my own all the statistical programs that we use today, because the stuff that I learned at school doesn't exist anymore, and I couldn't do my job without that stuff. And again, cyclical, think of the up and downs of the economy. Now, I also want you to take a look at this, right? So when we talk about the unemployment rate, we're looking at this line in light blue that we see at the bottom. Now, the red line is going to show us unemployment rate plus discouraged workers. The green line is going to show us unemployment rate plus discouraged plus other marginally attached. And the upper dark blue line is showing us unemployment rate plus discouraged workers plus other marginally attached plus part-time, right? So we measure all these combinations because we want to know exactly where people are. Think of why does unemployment rate varies, changes from state to state. So think of examples of structural unemployment, right? All the places that have disappeared. What are the things that we are demanding as consumers? So think of the image that I showed at the very beginning of how we are a very different workforce than 200 years ago, right? The type of jobs that we do is very, very different. Think of frictional unemployment. It could happen that, when you graduate, your industry is not hiring right away. It could happen that you are a lifeguard. So, well, it's going to be I live in the Northeast. It's going to be very different to get a job in January, right? You probably are very limited in the places that need a lifeguard, while in the summer, you have a lot more options. Think of the things that happens, think of 2008, think of the pandemic, think of the Great Depression. So I remember a lot of my students in May of 2020, they had these amazing jobs lined up for after graduation, and they were put on hold. Did they do anything wrong? No, absolutely not. They were outstanding. But no one was hiring because we didn't know how long the pandemic was going to last. Now, I want you to think, is it possible to have zero unemployment, to have absolutely everyone in the workforce? I dream of that, policymakers dream of that, but is that a possibility? I want you to think of that. Think of minimum wage. Where do you stand? Is this something that we should demand? Is this good for the economy? Is this not good for the economy? Think about these issues. And also think about the future of work. What are the skills that we're going to learn, we're going to have to learn in order to stay employed? And what I have seen in my own experience is that we have to always continue learning, right? So you're going to learn the basics at school, but then there is some continuing education that you're going to have to do to stay on top of your field. Let me know if you have any questions.